My name is Barbara Rivers. I'm 36, and 3 days ago, I went under the knife to have a tumor removed from my liver. The doctors said it was small, benign. Nothing I had to lose sleep over anymore. But the truth is, the surgery didn't destroy me. That came later when I looked down from my hospital room window and saw my husband holding hands with my sister. I wish I was exaggerating. I wish this was the morphine talking. But no, the morphine had already started to wear off. The sharp sting in my abdomen, the itch around the surgical staples, it was all real, just like the image burned into my brain. 37 floors below, in the glass-walled cafeteria of Cedars-Sinai, my husband Ethan sat at a corner table with Melody, my sister, my maid of honor, my best friend, the one who flew in from Portland, supposedly to help care for me during recovery. I pressed my forehead to the cold hospital window. From up here, they looked small, almost like dolls. But the intimacy between them wasn't small at all. Not subtle, not a misunderstanding. He leaned across the table and kissed her. Not a quick kiss, not family affection. This was a slow, lingering kiss, the kind you give someone when no one's watching, when no one's supposed to know. Except I did. I was watching. My hand gripped the metal windowsill, knuckles white. Pain pulsed through my side as the staples stretched with my breath. My stomach twisted, but not from surgery. It was heartbreak, betrayal, disgust. They didn't stop there. Her hand stayed in his. Their fingers interlocked like lovers at a park picnic. She laughed, head thrown back, eyes sparkling like it was the best day of her life. I recognized that laugh. It's the same laugh she used to win over every guy I liked in high school. The same laugh she used to get out of trouble with our parents. The same laugh that used to charm me, too, before I learned better. He reached across the table and traced soft circles on her palm. That made me want to scream. That was our thing, something he used to do when we first dated. When I cried in his arms the night my mother died. When he proposed in the snow outside that little cabin in Big Bear. When I thought he saw me, really saw me. I turned away from the glass, nausea curling in my chest. I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection. Pale, hollow-eyed, hair scraped back in a greasy bun. A hospital ghost. Melody, meanwhile, looked radiant, even from this distance. Her auburn hair shimmered under the cafeteria lights. She wore the navy blue dress I bought her last Christmas. The irony almost made me laugh if I wasn't choking on rage. A soft knock pulled me from the spiral. "Mrs. Rivers, time for your medication." Nurse Patricia, late 50s. Warm smile, sensible shoes, steady hands. She was one of the few people who didn't make me feel like a burden. She walked in carrying a paper cup of pills and a plastic glass of ice water. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, checking the machines beside my bed. I didn't trust my voice. I forced a weak smile. "Better," I lied. "Much better." "That's wonderful to hear." She meant it. "Your husband and sister, bless their hearts, have been rotating shifts to be here. That's real love. Honey, family love." My throat tightened. My fingernails dug into the scratchy hospital blanket. "Yeah," I said softly. "Beautiful, right." She chatted about the new rooftop garden on the 7th floor. I nodded. I even asked a question or two. But my mind was somewhere else, replaying that kiss, that handhold, that laugh. How long had it been going on? Did they wait until I was under anesthesia to finally be together? Did they cry next to me thinking I was going to die because they were sad? Or because they were afraid their secret would come out? The tumor had been benign, but for 48 hours, we thought I might be dying. Ethan had stayed by my side, crying into my hand, whispering promises. Melody had made soup, fluffed pillows, called our aunts. Had all of that been an act? After Nurse Patricia left, I sat in that motorized bed, staring at the ceiling tiles. I wanted to scream, but no one would hear me 37 stories up, and screaming meant giving them power. So instead, I did something else. My phone was charging on the tray table. I picked it up and turned the camera toward the window. Zoomed in. There they were, still talking, still holding hands, still sharing a damn muffin. Click. Photo 1. Click. Photo 2. I documented everything. Him tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, her hand on his thigh, his mouth brushing her temple. They weren't even trying to hide it. Why would they? I was supposed to be drugged, sedated, groggy. I was the weakened wife recovering from surgery. The last person they expected to notice, let alone act. I opened my messages, and right on cue, a new text from Ethan. Ethan, 2:09 p.m. Grabbing coffee? Wow, Mel. Be back soon. Love you. The audacity, the cruelty. I screenshot it. I started a folder in my phone, titled it Evidence. At 3:07 p.m., Melody arrived back at my room first. She smiled sweetly, cheeks flushed maybe from guilt, maybe from cold. She sat next to me, tucked a blanket around my feet. Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling? I looked into her hazel eyes and forced myself not to blink. Tired, I said. Where were you? Oh, just needed to stretch my legs. This place is stuffy. She squeezed my hand. Liar. A few minutes later, Ethan walked in with 2 coffees. One for her, one for him, not one for me. Hey, beautiful, he said, kissing my forehead. His lips were cold. You look better today. I feel better, I said. Patricia thinks I might be able to go home tomorrow. That's great news, he said, sitting beside Melody, their knees almost touching. She was saying she could stay another week to help, he added. Melody nodded eagerly. Only if that's okay with you. I smiled. Sweet. Small. Of course, I said, I don't know what I'd do without you two. They exchanged a quick glance. A flicker. So fast it could be missed unless you were watching for it. And I was watching everything now. The rest of the afternoon was a parade of lies dressed as kindness. They brought me old magazines, talked about Melody's design firm. Ethan boasted about his new campaign for a luxury hotel in Santa Barbara. I asked the right questions. I nodded in all the right places. But inside, I was building something, brick by silent brick. And I knew when I finally stood up, I wouldn't just walk away. I'd burn their little empire to the damn ground. You know how people talk about building something from scratch, like it's a romantic thing? Let me tell you, there's nothing romantic about it. Not when you're working 18-hour days. Not when you're maxing out credit cards to keep the lights on. Not when you're crying on the kitchen floor because a client bailed last minute and rent is due tomorrow. That's how Ethan and I built Rivers Marketing Solutions, our company, our so-called legacy. Just 2 overworked idiots chasing the American dream in a rented 1-bedroom in Silver Lake. He brought the creative flair. I brought the business grit. I used to joke that he was the artist, and I was the scaffolding holding up his ego. In 5 years, we turned that little agency into a boutique powerhouse. By year 3, we had 5 employees. By year 5, we were closing million-dollar accounts with luxury resorts and wellness brands. We had matching co-founder mugs. We gave keynote speeches at conferences. We were that couple admired, envied, photographed for magazine profiles. And behind every smiling photo, I was the one who held everything together. But Melody was always orbiting close enough to take, never close enough to build. She'd flit in and out of my life like a perfectly scented breeze there when I needed comfort, but never when I needed help. Until now. Until the tumor. Until my body became fragile, and my life felt like it might be slipping through my fingers. That's when she flew in to help. That's when she slid herself into my absence, professionally and personally. Sitting there in that hospital bed, I saw it all with new eyes. I thought back to 3 months ago, our anniversary. Ethan had made dinner reservations at a rooftop steakhouse in Beverly Hills, but halfway through the meal, he kept checking his phone. He claimed it was about a client, some urgent deadline. I remember trying to hold his hand across the table, only for him to pull it back to reply to a message. That moment came roaring back now. Was he texting her while I sat there in a red dress, thinking I still had a husband? Back at the hospital, Melody's voice brought me back. "So I've been thinking," she said, smoothing out the sleeves of her cardigan. "Maybe I could help with the client transition this month. You know, while you're still recovering." Client transition. She said it like we were changing airlines, like I hadn't built those relationships from the ground up. Ethan nodded along. "Yeah, we could route things through Melody's team temporarily, just to keep the pipeline steady." I stared at them both. "Temporarily?" I repeated, "Sure." And that was the moment I knew this wasn't just a fling. This was a quiet takeover, a corporate coup disguised as concern. Ethan and I each owned 50% of the company. We never imagined we'd need a prenup for business. Why would we? We were soulmates, right? We built it together. We trusted each other. Foolish me. That afternoon, when they finally left the hospital to go home and rest, I lay awake in that sterile white room, my body aching, but my brain sharper than it had felt in months. The betrayal had burned away every fog of denial. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Ethan. I called Benjamin Walsh. Benjamin had been our corporate attorney for years. He helped us set up the LLC, handled vendor disputes, even drafted my will when I got the tumor diagnosis. He was discreet, thorough, and most importantly, he worked fast. "Barbara." His voice came through crisp and low. "You okay?" "I need to discuss some legal scenarios," I said, privately. "Talk to me." I told him everything. The affair, the lies, the photos, the power shift, my suspicions about how long it had been going on, and what they might be planning next. Benjamin listened without interrupting. Occasionally, I heard the scratch of his pen. "You're in California," he said when I was done. "Community property state. So, technically, everything you built together would be split 50-50 in divorce unless we can prove fraud adultery. Adultery won't affect the split unless it directly impacted business decisions. But if you have evidence that Ethan and Melody conspired to push you out while you were incapacitated, that's different. That could shift things in your favor." I looked at the photos on my phone. My hands trembled a little, but not from fear. From adrenaline. What do I need? Everything. Screenshots, emails, credit card receipts, hotel records, texts, voicemails. Document everything. And Barbara. "Yes." "Don't let on that you know. Not yet." I hung up and sat in silence. The city outside sparkled like nothing was wrong, but inside me, something had snapped into place. This wasn't just about my marriage. This was about erasure, about being sidelined from the very thing I'd built, about how easy it was, in this country, for a woman to go from founder to forgotten the second she falters. I wasn't going to be erased. Not quietly. The next morning, Nurse Patricia brought in a portable mirror for me to brush my hair. It was a simple act, basic dignity, but I hadn't looked at myself in days. What I saw startled me. My face was thin, pale, sharp around the edges. My eyes were no longer dull. They were awake. I picked up the small silver wedding band from my nightstand, the one Ethan had slipped on my finger 12 years ago. I stared at it. Then, slowly, deliberately, I took it off and placed it on the sterile metal tray next to the medication cup. I didn't cry. Not then. There would be time for grief later. Right now. There was work to do. Barbara starts her quiet investigation, and the first cracks begin to show in Ethan and Melody's perfect little story. Someone's watching, and someone talks. They say betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It builds, layer by layer, tiny cuts that don't bleed until one day you look down and realize you're covered in wounds. After I got discharged from the hospital, Ethan insisted on driving me home. He'd even fluffed the pillows on the passenger seat, laid a blanket across my lap like I was some porcelain doll. "You just rest," he said, adjusting the rearview mirror. "Don't worry about a thing. Melody and I have everything covered at the office." Covered. Like I was a to-do item, like I didn't used to run that office. The drive from Cedars-Sinai to our townhouse in West LA felt longer than usual. Or maybe it was the silence. Ethan filled it with polite small talk traffic. Weather. How nice Patricia the nurse had been. I nodded at the right times. But all I could hear was static. That thick, white noise buzz of knowing someone's lying, but still pretending not to know. As we pulled into the garage, I spotted Melody's car parked in the guest spot. She was already inside. Of course she was. She had the keys. I wondered when that happened. The house smelled like cinnamon and lemon clean, almost artificially perfect. The way Airbnbs smell when they've been scrubbed of real life. Melody stood in the kitchen, chopping herbs. She turned around and beamed, like we were starring in some twisted sitcom. "Welcome home. Sis, I made chicken soup." My eyes went to the stove, then to the counter, where a handwritten recipe card sat in my handwriting. She had dug through my things, pulled out my family recipe, and cooked my comfort food like it was hers to give. That was the first cut of the day. I smiled. "Smells amazing." Later, while they were upstairs checking emails, I wandered into the home office, my old domain. The chair was adjusted higher. Melody's laptop was open on the desk connected to our project server. I didn't touch anything. I didn't need to. Everything I needed was already in the system. That night, once they were both asleep, Ethan on our bed, Melody in the guest room, I crept downstairs and opened my own laptop. Slowly, carefully, I accessed our shared drive, copying every folder into a password-protected external hard drive. Financials, contracts, vendor logs, pitch decks, anything that showed how I had built this company, and anything that hinted they were reshaping it without me. I also found something new. Melody had created a subfolder labeled RMS V2, inside new branding concepts, logo designs, internal memos addressed only to Ethan and Melody. I felt my stomach twist. They were planning a rebrand, a relaunch. Without me? That was the second cut. The next few days, I played the role: grateful wife, resting partner, fragile, healing, harmless. And while I smiled, I listened. They were careful, but not careful enough. On Thursday afternoon, I overheard Melody on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. "Yes, we'll announce after the investor meeting. No, Barbara won't be involved. She's stepping back for health reasons." Stepping back. I nearly dropped the tea mug in my hand. That's how casually they were rewriting my story. That evening, I waited until Ethan went out for a quick meeting and Melody was in the shower. I opened her purse, something I never would have done a month ago. Inside, I found her planner. She still used paper calendars, color-coded with tiny gel pens. I flipped to next week. Wednesday investor lunch, The Grove, 1 p.m. Confirm with Ethan. Investor, not client, not partner, investor. They weren't just rebranding the company. They were pitching it, selling it, without me. That was the third cut. And I bled in silence. But not for long. The next day, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Delia Grant, former employee, brilliant strategist. She'd left Rivers Marketing after a falling out with Ethan over a contract clause. I'd always suspected he lowballed her because she was young and Latina, and she'd walked away on principle. I texted her, Me.
Can we talk private and urgent? Coffee's on me.
Delia. Only if it's that cafe on Pico. You still hate their coffee, right? Me. I've learned to drink worse. An hour later, we sat across from each other, both holding paper cups and old grudges. I told her everything. Not the marriage parts that wasn't the focus. I told her about the rebrand, the investor meeting, the files, the exclusion. She listened with a poker face, tapping her nails on the table. "They're trying to erase your name from your own damn company," she finally said. "That's not just shady, that's illegal." "I want to hit back," I said quietly, "but clean. No drama, no scandal, just proof, exposure, and control." Delia grinned. "You called the right beach." That was the fourth cut. But it wasn't mine. That was theirs. Over the next 48 hours, Delia and I began mapping a quiet counteroffensive. We started pulling time-stamped records of when my accounts had been restricted, screenshots of meetings I wasn't invited to, edits to documents removing my name. I gave her access to the hard drive I'd compiled, and she compared it to the current server data. The discrepancies were obvious and damning. Meanwhile, I kept acting, smiling, letting Melody brush my hair, letting Ethan read me emails aloud from clients who missed me. Every time he touched my hand, I imagined wrapping it in velvet and setting it on a courtroom table. On Sunday night, as I sat in bed scrolling through photos, Ethan climbed in beside me. He wrapped his arm around me, kissed my shoulder. "You're really amazing, Barb," he said. "You've been so strong through all this." I turned my head and looked at him. I almost laughed, because the next morning I had an appointment of my own. A meeting Ethan knew nothing about. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet only expensive offices in downtown LA can afford. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek marble floors, and a receptionist who didn't blink twice when I walked in wearing oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf, like some grieving widow from a 1950s film noir. I stepped into Benjamin Walsh's office at exactly 9:00 a.m. He stood from behind his desk, a tall man in his late 40s, clean-shaven, no-nonsense type, the kind of lawyer who never spoke more than needed. But when he did, people listened. He gestured toward the seat opposite his. "I've cleared the morning," he said. "Talk to me." I pulled out a thick black folder carefully tabbed, labeled, and color-coded. Delia's work. Mostly. My heart beat faster as I slid it across to him. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. "This is everything," I said. "Correspondence, financial activity, internal documents, some screenshots of text messages, meeting memos from the company server, password logs." He opened the folder. His eyes flicked across the contents. Page after page. He let out a small whistle. "You weren't exaggerating." "I told you," I replied, voice steady. "They're preparing to rebrand, pitch to investors, and push me out if not legally, then strategically. While I was recovering from surgery, and while sleeping with your sister." I nodded. He leaned back in his chair. "You want scorched earth?" I paused. "No," I said. "I want leverage. I want protection. And I want control." Benjamin smirked. "Good, because revenge is satisfying, but leverage pays the bills." We spent the next 2 hours outlining a legal strategy. Step 1. We would freeze all major company decisions pending a forensic review, something I could trigger as a co-founder and board member under our corporate bylaws. Step 2. Gather enough preliminary evidence to present to the other board members and key investors. Step 3. Force Ethan and Melody to the table under pressure, while I still held the narrative. I left that office with more than a legal plan. I left with a battle map. Back home, the air had changed. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was different. but I started to notice little things I'd ignored before. The way Melody lingered a little too long when Ethan laughed. The way Ethan never said I love you unless I said it first. The way they both fell silent when I walked into a room, as if my presence was an interruption in their private world. But I didn't confront them. Not yet. That would have been too easy, too loud. Instead, I began to tighten the net. Monday night, I staged a moment. I left my laptop open on the kitchen table, seemingly by accident. On the screen, a draft email to our bank, requesting updated authorization documents. I knew Melody would see it. I knew she'd report it. I just didn't expect her to act so fast. The next morning, Benjamin called. "You won't believe this," he said. "Your husband just tried to shift 2 of your joint accounts into a newly registered LLC under his name, and get this, Melody's—" "What name?" "Blue Haven Collective." I laughed. It was so on brand, so soft and meaningless, like a yoga retreat scam. "What did the bank say?" I asked. "They froze the request, per our flag last week, but now you've got them attempting financial fraud. That's going in the folder." They weren't just erasing me from the company. They were stealing my name, my work, and laundering it through a wellness-flavored lie. I wasn't angry.
I was surgical.
Later that evening, I told Ethan I wanted to sit in on the upcoming investor pitch. I used soft words. I acted uncertain, self-effacing. "I think I might be ready," I said. "Just to listen, if that's okay." He blinked. "Of course," he replied, too quickly. "But I thought you wanted to rest." "I do," I said. "But I need to feel useful again. Just one meeting. I'll stay quiet." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right." He lied with his mouth, but his hands tightened around his phone. That was the tell. I knew they'd try to block me, and I was ready. That night, I sat in the bathroom, door locked, holding my phone and rereading old emails between Melody and me from years ago. Back when we were real sisters. Or at least when I believed we were. One message stood out. She'd written it the week after my mother's funeral. "I don't know how you hold so much grief, pressure, expectations. I'd fall apart. I had held so much. And now I was letting it go, but on my terms." The next morning, I made my move. I sent a confidential notice to our board, invoking Clause 6.4 of our operating agreement co-founder emergency veto. It allowed me to temporarily halt any major reorganization, investor presentations, or brand relaunch decisions for 14 days, pending review. The moment I hit send, a timer started ticking. The next 2 weeks would decide everything. At 3:00 p.m. that day, Melody stormed into the kitchen holding her phone. "You sent a block to the board," she snapped. "You blindsided us." I stood calmly at the stove, stirring a pot of lentil soup. "You're upset," I said, "because I exercised my legal right to review a pitch I co-created." Ethan walked in behind her, jaw clenched. "This isn't healthy, Barb," he said. "We've been trying to support you, and you're making it difficult." "Support me." I almost dropped the spoon. "You're welcome to leave," I replied coolly. "Anytime." They didn't answer. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the lights were low, I walked into the guest room where Melody had been staying. I stared at the bed, the closet full of clothes she had unpacked like she planned to stay forever. Then I opened the drawer. Inside, I found a journal. I hesitated, then flipped to the middle. Page after page, her handwriting. Rambling notes about the company, Ethan, me. One entry stood out, written only days after my surgery. "She's going to hate me if she ever finds out. But I think I already lost her the moment I chose him." I read it twice. A pulse of something I couldn't name grief, maybe flashed through my chest. But I tucked the journal back exactly where I found it. Because feeling sorry for her wasn't part of the plan. The investor pitch was scheduled for Thursday, 11:00 a.m. sharp, at the Wrenwood Hotel in Beverly Hills. Private conference suite. Catering from some Michelin-starred place. Name tags. Custom folders. Branded pens. Blue Haven Collective. That name alone made me want to vomit. It was like they took the ashes of Rivers marketing and blew glitter on top. But let them decorate their funeral. I was ready to deliver the eulogy. I arrived early. Not as Barbara, the recovering wife. Not even as co-founder. I came as a woman who had been betrayed and buried and had clawed her way back through every lie. Black dress, red lipstick, simple pearl studs my mother's. A symbol, maybe, a reminder that I came from women who endured. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. "I'm here for the pitch," I said calmly. "Oh, yes, of course. Mr. Rivers is already inside." I smiled. Perfect. As I entered the glass-walled room, I saw them, Ethan, pacing near the whiteboard, Melody, flipping through handouts. A dozen investors sat neatly around the oval table, sipping cucumber water and murmuring politely. Ethan's voice was smooth, rehearsed. "As you can see, our rebrand will allow us to scale toward wellness-conscious markets while leveraging our luxury client base." He saw me mid-sentence and froze. "Barbara." His voice cracked just enough to thrill me. I walked to the open chair next to the oldest investor, Howard Cummings, a stern, white-haired man who had been with us since our first coastal resort campaign. "Good to see you, Howard," I said. "You haven't aged a day." Howard chuckled. "Neither have you. Glad to see you up and about." Ethan was panicking behind his perfect teeth. We weren't expecting you."
I'm still on the board, I said, opening a leather folder. Thought I'd exercise my right to observe. Unless you're presenting something I shouldn't hear.
Melody didn't speak. She just pressed her lips together and avoided my eyes. "Of course not," Ethan said, through a tight smile. "We were just getting started." The pitch resumed, but the room had shifted. I sat still, taking notes, letting my presence twist the air. He stuttered once. Melody dropped a clicker. A junior investor furrowed his brow at a slide that made no sense. And then it came, the moment I'd been waiting for. Slide 23, Financial Projections. Projected Q3 revenues under the Blue Haven model. I raised my hand. "Sorry, quick question," I said. "Can you clarify how you calculated the transition costs? Because based on the server data, only 62% of client accounts have confirmed migration. The rest are either unresolved or pending." Ethan blinked. "We had internal confirmation." From whom, I asked. Because as of 2 days ago, none of the senior account managers had signed off. A few heads turned, whispered notes scribbled.
I leaned forward. Would it help if I played a voice message?
Ethan's jaw tensed. "Barbara, this isn't the time." But I was already pressing play. Delia's voice filled the room, calm and razor sharp. "As of Tuesday, no legal handoff of accounts has been approved. Attempting to represent them under a new entity without written consent could constitute breach of contract." Silence. Then Howard spoke. "Ethan, is that true?" Ethan sputtered. "It's being finalized. We've been in progress." Howard looked at me. "Barbara, do you have documentation?"
I smiled. Would you like digital or hard copy?
The next 15 minutes were chaos. I presented a condensed timeline. Flagged transactions Ethan and Melody initiated behind my back. Highlighted the legal freeze currently placed on any rebrand activity. Benjamin had prepped the file, clean and airtight. And then I gave them the last dagger. I handed Howard a sealed envelope. Inside, a notarized affidavit from one of our longest-serving clients, stating they were unaware of the Blue Haven rebrand and would terminate their contract if Barbara Rivers was not on the executive team. It was the same client Ethan had boasted about landing solo. They'd chosen me. The room shifted again, only this time, in my favor. Melody stood. I need a break." She stepped outside, heels clicking. Ethan didn't follow her. The meeting adjourned early. Several investors asked to reconsider alignment. Others requested one-on-ones with me. I gathered my things slowly. As I turned to leave, Ethan spoke. "You planned this," he said. His voice was low, sharp. "You set us up." "No," I replied. "You set me aside. I just walked back in." Outside, Melody was sitting on a stone bench, her hands shaking around a paper coffee cup. She looked up as I approached. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it," she whispered. I sat beside her. Neither did Ethan. She stared ahead, eyes glassy. "You know, I thought if I could just be you, I'd be happy, that somehow stealing your life would fix mine." I stayed quiet. She turned to me. "But it doesn't. I'm still empty, even now." The silence stretched between us like wet rope. "You didn't just betray me," I said finally. "You erased me. But the thing about ghosts, we always come back." She looked down at her lap. "I'm sorry, Barb. Truly." I stood, too late. I walked away before she could follow. But 20 feet from the elevator, I heard her phone buzz. Then mine buzzed too. Same number. Same message. A video link. I opened it and froze. It was security footage. Me, weeks ago, in the hospital, standing at the window, camera zoomed in, capturing Ethan and Melody in the cafeteria. But this footage wasn't mine. It was from a third angle. Someone had been watching me. My fingers hovered over the screen as I stared at the video link. The angle, it wasn't from any hospital surveillance I had access to. This was personal, handheld, close enough to catch the raw disbelief on my face. Me, post-surgery, weak and hunched at the window, behind the glass. Ethan and Melody laughing over iced teas like they'd just won the lottery. I clicked play. A voice, barely audible, whispered into the camera mic. "She sees them. Let's see what she does next." I paused it immediately. My blood turned to static. This wasn't just footage. This was an audience.
A witness?
Someone had been there, watching, recording me, and not for my safety. I checked the number. Unknown. Burner. Then the message vanished. Gone. Self-deleting file. Whoever sent it knew what they were doing. I called Delia. "Someone sent me footage," I said, pacing the marble floor of the hotel lobby, of Ethan and Melody, from the hospital, but it wasn't from hospital security. Delia's voice was calm, but clipped. "Forward it?" "I can't. It disappeared." "What kind of footage?" "From the hallway. Like, someone was standing behind me, whispered into the mic, said, 'Let's see what she does next.'" She was silent. "Delia," I prompted. "I know who might have that kind of access." She finally said, "But you're not going to like it." "Try me." 2 years ago, Ethan hired a private digital security firm when we had that PR leak. Remember? I did. Barely. Some false rumor about a celebrity client's lawsuit. "Well," she continued, "he kept them on retainer, quietly, claimed it was for future-proofing reputational risk. But they're ex-military types, surveillance freaks. One guy name's Kellen, he's obsessive. Meaning he records everything, sometimes even without clearance." I felt the old dread rise in my stomach like cold water.
You think Ethan hired him to watch me?
Delia exhaled. "I think someone wanted insurance, and you just tripped over it." I ended the call with one thought thudding in my mind. If they'd been watching me all along, what else had they seen? What else had they kept? The next morning, I drove out to an address Delia had texted an anonymous co-working space in Burbank where the firm had registered a mailbox. Kellen was there. Mid-40s, thin, wiry, beard too short to be stylish, Too long to be military. Eyes that didn't blink enough. He looked at me like he already knew why I came. I figured you'd show up, he said, sipping a Red Bull. I want the files, I said. All of them. He raised an eyebrow. Not even a good morning. I stepped closer. I'm not asking twice. He smiled, slow and unsettling. I've got hours of footage, he said. Hard drive in a safety locker, copies in cloud storage. I don't delete anything unless paid to, or unless it becomes mutually beneficial. I swallowed hard. What do you want? He leaned back, thoughtful. You think I do this for fun? People like Ethan pay me to bury things, to see things before they explode. But you're interesting. You didn't explode. You calculated. I'm not interested in compliments. He held up a flash drive. Then you'll like this. It's not flattery, it's evidence. Audio and video. One file in particular, you're going to want it. I took it. My hand brushed his, cold fingers like a reptile. Back in my car, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. One folder, Client R. Dozens of audio files. I clicked the most recent. Ethan's voice. If she finds out, we're screwed. Melody. She's getting suspicious. Should we just go public, rip off the Band-Aid? Ethan, no. We ride it out. Once the investors are locked, we'll rewrite everything. Melody. And if she doesn't go quietly? Ethan, then we make her look crazy. She's already fragile. That last line hit harder than I expected. They had a plan B to paint me unstable. Sick, erratic, delusional. I remembered all the gentle tone Ethan used around me lately. Rest, Barbara. Don't overthink. You've been through a lot. You're not yourself lately. They weren't helping me heal. They were priming a narrative. I felt my lungs close in, but rage kept me breathing. I dialed Benjamin. Send a cease and desist, I said. To both of them. Include Kellen's audio. Let's make it official. He didn't ask questions. That afternoon, Melody came home alone. Ethan was running errands. She found me in the kitchen, sipping tea like nothing had happened. Her face was pale. You got the tapes, she said softly. I didn't answer. She dropped into a chair. Her hands trembled. Not with guilt. With fear? I didn't know he was planning all that, she whispered. No, I asked, because your voice was on every file. Tears welled up. I didn't want to destroy you. Barb, I just wanted to feel special. You were always the star, the strong one. I was always second. That's not an excuse. I know. I protected you, even when you didn't deserve it. She looked up. What are you going to do now? I'm going to end it, cleanly, publicly. But if this goes to court, I cut her off. It won't, because you're going to help me. A pause. How? You're going to testify. In front of the board. You'll confirm the breach, the intent to defraud, and you'll do it in writing. She stared at me. And if I don't? Then I release everything, and you go down with him. Silence. Then, slowly, she nodded. That evening, Delia and I prepared the draft. Melody signed it at 11:42 p.m., initials on every page. As I watched her finish, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. She was relieved, almost grateful. Maybe, deep down, she wanted a way out all along. But just as I began to feel a sliver of peace, my phone buzzed again. No number. Just one line. The real betrayal hasn't surfaced yet. Check the basement. I stared at the message. The real betrayal hasn't surfaced yet. Check the basement. Even after everything after the pitch, sabotage, Melody's written confession, the audio evidence, and legal paperwork, I hadn't felt truly afraid. But that line, it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Ethan was gone. Melody had checked into a hotel after signing the statement. I was alone. I moved through the foyer slowly. Every sound sharp: the creak of the stairs, the hum of the fridge, the muffled thud of my heels against hardwood. The basement door loomed ahead, half open. That door had always felt cold, literal or imagined. I couldn't say. Ethan used it as storage, mostly boxes, old tech, holiday decorations, things we no longer had time for. I flicked the light switch. Nothing.
Of course.
I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, still had my label on it. Hurricane Prep, from 2 summers ago. I opened the basement door fully and descended, each step sinking like a heartbeat. The beam of the flashlight sliced through dust.
Nothing unusual at first.
Cardboard boxes, a broken desk lamp, a cooler, an old yoga mat. Then, tucked behind a stack of crates, I spotted a black plastic bin, labeled in Ethan's handwriting, Client Archives, 2010-2020. He'd always been sloppy with dates, but I remembered 2010 was when Melody joined the company, and 2020 was the year I had my first miscarriage. I pried the lid open. Inside, manila folders, flash drives, a hardbound notebook. I flipped the first folder open. Invoices from Kellen's firm, dated months before the PR crisis, months before Ethan claimed he'd hired them for reputation management. He'd been surveilling me even back then. The second folder worse. Photos of me at conferences, at cafes, at the OB/GYN. In some, I was crying. In others, I was asleep. I dropped the folder, bile rising in my throat. Then I opened the notebook. Not Ethan's handwriting. Melody's. She'd written journal-style entries, not just about me, but about my fertility, my cycles, appointments, missed meds, emotional states. There were phrases underlined. She doesn't know I check her pill organizer. I switched her vitamins again today. She'll never carry full term. Ethan's sure it's stress, but I think it's karma. I couldn't breathe.
They hadn't just betrayed me.
They had interfered with my body, my health, my grief. This wasn't just emotional abuse. It was medical sabotage. I stumbled upstairs, heart hammering, dragging the box behind me. Delia answered on the first ring. I found something, I gasped. We need to go to the police. She was at my door in 30 minutes. We documented everything. Photos, audio, screenshots, a copy of the pill organizers I still hadn't thrown away. Benjamin joined the next day. This is beyond civil, he said, jaw tight. This is criminal, and we have chain of evidence. 2 days later, we filed a report.
And then the storm broke.
A local news outlet ran the story first. LA entrepreneur alleges co-founder tampered with health during fertility treatments. A longer feature followed on a national blog, complete with clips of Melody's signed statement and security footage from the hospital. Public sympathy poured in, but the legal process, slow, grinding. Still, I showed up. For every hearing, for every deposition. Melody cut a deal. In exchange for full testimony, Ethan fought it, denied everything, claimed conspiracy. But the files didn't lie. In the end, he lost everything: the company, his licenses, his reputation. The board ousted him unanimously. And me. I rebranded. Rivers Collective. Back under my name. Small team, high impact, focused on advocacy campaigns and ethical business coaching. I even started hosting workshops for women in recovery from toxic relationships, from workplace abuse, from betrayal. It wasn't just business. It was rebuilding. Some days, I still wake up angry, or hollow, or both. But every time I put on those pearl earrings, I remember I survived. Because the truth, revenge wasn't the reward. Freedom was.
So what's the lesson here?
It's not just about betrayal. It's about silence. About how people assume that a woman recovering from surgery won't notice the way hands shift papers, or how passwords change, or how bottles are relabeled. About how the strongest among us are expected to be endlessly forgiving. But forgiveness without justice, that's just surrender. So if you're watching this, wondering if you're crazy for noticing something off,
You're not.
if you're tired of people calling you too much when all you want is enough, you're not alone. And if you're thinking it's too late to fight back, I promise you, it's not. If you stayed till the end, drop A in the comments, like, share, and subscribe if you believe loyalty should never be a one-way street. Until next time, stay sharp, because the people smiling at you might be hiding the knife. And sometimes, it's not until you lose everything that you finally find out who you really are. Story 2. My name is Isabel Grant. I'm 36. And the night I walked into my own apartment and saw a pair of red high heels that didn't belong to me was the night everything I believed about love, loyalty, and success shattered. They were just sitting there, right in the middle of the hallway tile, bold, polished, scarlet, like a warning flare in the dark. Christopher never wore shoes like that, and he sure as hell wasn't supposed to have someone in our apartment who did. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. My breath caught in my throat. My mind tried to rationalize maybe they were my assistants. Maybe someone had stopped by. But then came the sounds. Whispers, low, breathy laughter. The unmistakable rhythm of our bed creaking. I froze, heart in my throat. My fingers tingled. Either from adrenaline or cold rage, I couldn't tell. But I moved. 1 step, 2. The door wasn't even fully shut. I pushed it open.
And there he was.
Christopher, my husband, the man I co-founded a company with, hosted holidays with, loved through failure and fortune, lying tangled in our 800 thread count Egyptian cotton sheets with a woman I'd never seen before. She was laughing until she saw me. Her red hair spilled across my pillow like fire licking up dry wood. She gasped, pulled the blanket up to her chest. Christopher didn't flinch. He looked at me, not with guilt, not even surprise, annoyance. As if I'd barged in on his evening. Seriously, he said, you couldn't call first. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat was tightening, my chest aching, but no tears came. I refused to cry in front of them. Not here. Not like this. I turned, slammed the door so hard it rattled the frame. My coat was on the rack by the front door. I grabbed it blindly, the wool scratching my bare arms. Then I ran. The cold air of Manhattan in late February smacked me like a slap, but it was still warmer than what I'd just felt in that room. I didn't even know where I was going. My heels echoed down the sidewalk as I half ran, half stumbled past lit-up windows and rushing taxis. My mind screamed, keep walking, keep breathing. A light caught my eye, a small cafe on the corner of 6th and West 11th Elm and Ivy. It looked like a fireplace in the middle of a snowstorm, warm, glowing. I pushed the door open. Bells jingled. People looked up. I must have looked like hell face pale. Mascara streaked. Hair wild from wind and humiliation. The barista didn't ask questions, just handed me a paper cup of coffee and said gently, "It's on the house. You look like you need it." That cup, I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it was the first act of kindness I'd received in hours. Maybe because I needed something, anything that didn't come from him. I sat in the corner, cradling it with both hands, staring at the rising steam like it might spell out what to do next. I had no purse, no money, no plan, no home. Really not anymore. People came and went. Some glanced my way. curious. Most ignored me. When the cafe closed, I stepped back out into the storm. My fingers were stiff, my knees shaking. I couldn't go back to that apartment. And I wasn't about to show up crying at a friend's place like some tragic Lifetime movie.
So I walked.
Blocks blurred, lights smeared through falling snow. It was as if the city was refusing to be clear with me, the way Christopher had refused to be real for years. Eventually, my feet carried me somewhere familiar. My office? New York Publishing Group, home to best-selling memoirs, political exposés, indie debut novels, many of which I had personally fought to get signed. I had a key. I always had a key, because I was always there. I stood in front of the tall glass doors, snow melting into my lashes. This place, it had been my second home for over a decade. Now, it was all I had left. I unlocked the door and stepped into the lobby, silent, dark, but not cold. My heels echoed on the polished floor as I moved past empty cubicles, past award plaques, past the glass wall of the boardroom where, just 2 weeks ago, I'd led a strategy meeting that had saved our next quarter.
"Who's there?" a voice called.
I jumped. From the security booth near the front, Mike, the overnight guard, stepped out, squinting. He was in his 60s, silver hair, thick glasses. He'd worked there as long as I had. "It's me," I said softly. "Isabel." Mike frowned. "Miss Grant, you scared the hell out of me. Are you okay?" I nodded, then shook my head, then managed a wobbly smile. "Can I crash in my office tonight? I won't be any trouble." Mike stepped closer, took one look at my face, my smudged eyeliner, my wind-burnt cheeks, and didn't ask anything else. "You don't have to ask me, sweetheart," he said gently. "You look like you've been through hell. I'll put on some tea." For the first time that night, I felt something close to comfort. He brought me chamomile in a ceramic mug he kept at his desk. No questions, just quiet company. I curled up in my office chair, surrounded by half-edited manuscripts and post-it notes with potential taglines. My fortress of logic and language. But there was no defense strong enough to block the replay of that scene in my bedroom. His smirk, her laugh. Not guilt, not shame, just irritation. That was what killed me more than the betrayal. It wasn't just that he cheated, it was that he didn't care. He had dismissed me long before he ever touched her. And suddenly, it all clicked. The we in our business pitches always his vision. The hours I worked, framed as my obsession, not dedication. Every success, his charisma. Every mistake, my oversight. For years, I'd convinced myself we were a team. But in his eyes, I was just the editor, the support act, the woman behind the curtain. I looked down at my desk, at the brass nameplate, Isabel Grant, Editor-in-Chief. I'd fought for that title, earned it, bled for it. Before Christopher ever bought into the company, I'd been here, building, shaping, holding this place up. My stomach twisted, a different kind of fire lit behind my ribs. If he wanted war, he'd get it. But I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't make a scene. I'd do what I've always done best. I'd rewrite the narrative. And he wouldn't see it coming. He thought I had nothing left. He forgot who helped him build everything. When I woke the next morning, I wasn't sure if I'd actually slept or just closed my eyes long enough for night to pass. The office was still, quiet in the kind of way only early New York mornings can be before the phones start ringing and the espresso machine whines, before the emails flood in, demanding explanations and deliverables. My mouth was dry, my shoulders stiff. The cheap office couch had left an imprint down one side of my arm. But I didn't care. I was still wearing yesterday's blouse, still had the same tangle in my hair. But something inside me had shifted. No more autopilot, no more pretending. I sat up slowly, stretched, and walked toward the window that overlooked Madison Avenue. Below, the city was already churning cabs honking, couriers darting across the crosswalk, New Yorkers moving forward, always forward. And I would too. I turned back toward my desk. That's when I saw it. A post-it, Mike's handwriting, coffee's brewing downstairs. And yes, I locked the front door this time, M. I smiled for the first time in what felt like days. That old man had more faith in me than my own husband. I kept the note, stuck it inside the paper cup from last night, a growing shrine of small kindnesses. I needed to shower. I needed real food. But first, I needed to think. What now? I didn't want to tell anyone yet. Not my friends, not my team. The gossip would be volcanic, and the company still half mine on paper, at least. But if I was going to survive what was coming, I had to understand how deep the betrayal went. And I didn't just mean Christopher's affair. Because here's the thing, the cheating. That wasn't the worst part. It was how prepared he seemed, how calm, like he'd been waiting for me to find out, like my exit was already part of his plan. I opened my laptop, logged into our shared calendar. His schedule was locked. Not unusual, he had always insisted on privacy. Then I remembered his assistant, Megan, had accidentally sent me a calendar invite weeks ago. A strategic planning meeting scheduled at 8 a.m. this morning with Victoria Blake in the executive conference room. They didn't even bother being discreet. I looked down at myself. Wrinkled blouse, mascara shadows, still smelled like chamomile and stale heartbreak. Good. I grabbed my coat and walked down 2 flights of stairs to the conference level. My heels clicked like gunfire against the marble floor. And there they were. Christopher, in a navy jacket and fresh haircut, flipping through presentation slides like nothing had happened. Victoria in a tight beige sheath dress, her red curls pinned back like a news anchor. "Isabel," he said, startled. "What are you?" "Don't stop on my account." I said calm, too calm. I love a good early morning strategy session. Victoria's eyes darted toward him, then to me. She stayed seated but crossed her legs too quickly, like she was bracing. Christopher stepped forward. "You didn't come home." "You had company," I said. He rubbed his jaw. "You're overreacting." I blinked slowly. Overreacting. The word hung in the air like smoke from a cheap cigar. "You're sitting in a company I helped build," I said, stepping closer, using a boardroom I negotiated for, working with a woman who what understands you better. Victoria stood now. "Look, I'm not trying to get in the middle of anything." "You already did," I said sharply. Christopher raised his voice. "This isn't the place for personal drama." I smiled. "You brought your personal drama into our marital bed. This is just me responding like a professional." He scowled. "You're embarrassing yourself." I stepped back, slow and deliberate. "No, Christopher, what I'm about to do, that's when you'll see what embarrassment feels like." I turned and walked out. I could feel Victoria's eyes burning a hole in my back. Good. That interaction confirmed something he thought he'd already won. And that gave me power. I took the elevator up, hands shaking slightly, not from fear, from restraint. Back at my desk, I unlocked the bottom drawer, took out an envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside, the original co-founding agreement for Grant Miller Media, dated, signed, before the company was incorporated. And stapled to it, my editorial notes on the manuscript that got us our first breakout deal, a political memoir that went on to become a New York Times bestseller. That book had been dead before I touched it. I'd cut 30,000 words, rewrote the first 3 chapters myself when the author disappeared to rehab. Christopher had convinced the agent to stay, but I had made the damn thing readable. And here it was in black and white, my edits, my IP notes, my annotations. I flipped to the back page. There it was. Clause 7C, all editorial-originated content, intellectual property, or derivative narrative structures originated by Grant shall remain the exclusive property of Grant unless otherwise stated in subsequent contract negotiation. That clause I had inserted it. Christopher had laughed at it at the time. You really think someone's going to steal your semicolons, babe? I had insisted. Lawyers can steal more than punctuation. He signed it anyway, not thinking twice. Now I had leverage. And not just for one book. For 27 projects I had led, structured, and editorially shaped without ever being acknowledged beyond the masthead. I took out my phone. I didn't call a divorce attorney. I called someone better. Alexander Shaw. He used to work as a copyright litigator before starting his own firm. We'd crossed paths at a publishing conference years ago, when he took on a case involving ghost-written memoirs and improper attribution. He picked up on the second ring. "Isabel Grant," he said. "Haven't heard from you in forever." "I need your help," I said, "and I need it discreet." He didn't ask why, just said, "Come by the office at noon. Bring whatever you've got." I looked again at the old contract, at the editorial markup with my faded yellow highlighter. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about recognition. He thought he could strip away everything I'd built. He forgot who put up the beams and carried the bricks. Symbol callback. As I reached for my coat, I placed the paper coffee cup and Mike's Post-it inside my bag. Not because I was sentimental, because those small things reminded me of who I was before him, and who I would be again. But before I left the building, I stopped by the security booth. "Mike," I said, leaning against the glass, "you said the cameras are always rolling, right?" He glanced up, startled. "They record movement zones." "Yeah. Why?" "Just wondering." I smiled. "Did they catch anyone?" "Entering the executive suite last night." He raised an eyebrow. "Want me to pull the footage?" I didn't answer, just nodded once. Mike stood slowly. "You're not planning something crazy, are you?" "Not yet," I said. "But give me the right footage. And I might..." It started with a betrayal. It ends with a signature. Mike called me just after 10 a.m. "You might want to come down here," he said, voice lower than usual. "There's something on the overnight footage you'll want to see." I took the stairs 2 at a time. When I got to the security room, Mike was already rewinding through a clip, fast-forwarding through hours of silence and empty hallways. He paused at a frame. "There," he said, tapping the screen. The timestamp read 12:43 a.m. And there she was, Victoria Blake, entering the building through the side entrance with a keycard. My stomach tightened. "She's not on the after-hours access list," Mike muttered. "That keycard was assigned to Christopher. He must have given it to her." Victoria walked confidently through the darkened lobby, heels echoing. She wasn't sneaking around. She looked like she belonged. "She goes straight to his office," Mike continued. "About 20 minutes later, he shows up. They leave together at 2:12 a.m. I stared at the footage, my jaw clenching. They weren't just having an affair. They were using company property, after hours. That was a legal liability. That was corporate misconduct. That was the leverage I needed. "Mike," I said, still watching the screen, "can you email me this clip?" He hesitated. "You sure you want to go down this road?" "Isabel." I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't choose the road. I just woke up on it. He gave me a slow nod. Fair enough. By noon, I was at Alexander Shaw's office in Midtown sleek glass, brushed steel, and a skyline view that made you feel like power was a default setting. Alexander stepped out from behind his desk, hand extended, smile warm but knowing. "It's been a while." "Too long," I said, handing him a manila folder. "Everything's in there, contract, edits, timestamps, camera footage." He opened it, flipping through pages. Clause 7C. Oh, that's a beautiful piece of legal foresight. I smiled thinly. He always laughed at how careful I was. Said I overthought everything. Overthinking just became your greatest weapon, Alexander said. This clause gives you legal ownership of the editorial content you created, even under a joint business. And the footage? He nodded. If you can prove they used company premises for a non-professional relationship that jeopardized workplace integrity, this isn't just divorce court. It's a board-level scandal. He leaned back. Isabel, this is big, but it won't be easy. If Christopher senses a threat, he'll move fast. Probably try to freeze you out of the company before this gains traction. I leaned forward. Then I need to move faster. Back at the office, I could feel the shift the second I stepped off the elevator. Whispers. People avoided my eyes. Emails were shorter. A few junior editors stopped talking when I passed. It was already happening. Christopher was poisoning the air around me, just like I knew he would.
At lunch, Megan the receptionist slipped into my office with a worried look.
I thought you should see this, she whispered, dropping a printed memo onto my desk.
It was from the board.
Effective immediately, all financial decisions exceeding $5,000 required dual approval by co-founder Christopher Miller. I stared at the page. They were cutting my legs out from under me, quietly, officially. Megan, I said, voice even, do you believe I've done anything to hurt this company? She blinked. No, never. Then I need your help. Her eyes widened, but she nodded. What do you need? Over the next 48 hours, I built a file, every edit I'd ever made, every internal review email that showed my authors relied on me more than him, every pitch I'd led, every sale I'd closed, the data, the dates, the authors themselves. And then I made calls, not to attorneys, to authors, to agents, to the people who actually trusted me. On Friday morning, I walked into the executive floor carrying two things: a leather folder with over 50 signed letters of support, a new coffee cup from Almond Ivy. The barista had written on it again, "You're stronger than your worst moment." Symbol, proof, reminder. I stepped into the boardroom during Christopher's meeting with the potential investors. A man named Charles Langley Graysuit, power tie, and a net worth probably in the 9 digits was seated at the head of the table. Christopher's eyes narrowed. Isabel, this is a closed. I think Mr. Langley would like to hear what I have to say, I said coolly, sliding the folder across the table. He raised a brow, opened it. Inside a letter from the New York Times book editor stating that without my revisions, the political memoir would have been unpublishable. Behind that, letters from 12 authors, including our top-selling thriller writer, pledging their loyalty to me, not the company. Langley took his time reading. Then he looked up at Christopher. Is this accurate? Christopher's face turned red. That's subjective. She's exaggerating her role. No, I interrupted. He's minimizing mine, like he always has. Langley turned to me. And what exactly do you want, Ms. Grant? I want an independent review of the founding documents. I want the board to freeze all asset reallocation until that review is done. And I want Christopher off the IP pipeline. The room went quiet. Christopher stood, furious. You're trying to destroy everything we built. No, I said, standing too. I'm trying to stop you from stealing what I built. Langley leaned back. You'll have my legal team by Monday. I nodded. I'll have mine ready. Back in my office, I sat down. My hands shook, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I glanced over at my desk, where the old coffee cup still sat, next to Mike's Post-it. You got this. I didn't realize I was crying until one drop hit the rim of the cup. And then, the knock came. 3 soft taps. I opened the door. Victoria stood there, no makeup, hair down, eyes red-rimmed. "Can we talk?" she whispered. The mistress had something to confess, and it would change everything. Victoria stood at my office door like a ghost caught between timelines, hair loose, face bare, lips pressed into a nervous line. She wasn't the same perfectly polished woman from the boardroom. This version looked real and wrecked. "I just need a few minutes," she said softly. "Then I'll leave. I swear."
I didn't say anything, just stepped aside.
She sat slowly across from me, her knees pressed together like she was bracing for impact. I watched her scan the room, the shelves lined with manuscripts, the framed letter from the Times editor, the old coffee cup with faded writing, still sitting next to Mike's post-it. "This place looks like someone lives in it," she murmured. "I have," I replied, "for the last 10 years. She nodded, then looked up, eyes glassy. "I didn't come to justify anything. I didn't know." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know what, exactly?" "That Christopher was trying to erase you," she said. "I thought he was just divorced emotionally. That the company was something he built alone." I laughed. Dry. Cold. "Let me guess. He told you I was the tired wife who refused to dream bigger, that I was the anchor holding him back from innovation." Her silence was answer enough. I leaned back. "So what changed?" She reached into her coat and pulled out a folder. "I was asked to prep a funding proposal last week. It included a revised history of Grant Miller Media for investors." I took the folder, opened it, and there it was. The official company profile with my name completely removed. No co-founder mention, no editor-in-chief, no photos. The story was rewritten, founded by Christopher Miller in 2011, driven by his vision for modern storytelling. I felt something in my chest crack. Victoria continued, quietly. "He told me you'd stepped down, that you were grateful to hand things off. But when I read that essay, it didn't feel right." I looked up at her. "Why are you really telling me this?" Her voice broke. "Because I was used, just like you were. He promised me a VP role once the new investment cleared. Said if I helped him transition the company away from old editorial control, he'd give me a seat at the table. And now I asked." She shook her head. "He ghosted me. After that meeting with Langley. Won't take my calls. I think I was just a pawn." For a moment, I said nothing. "Then you were, but even pawns can ruin a king." She looked at me like she wanted to cry again. "I'm not asking you to forgive me." "Good," I said flatly, "because I don't." "But maybe," she added, "I can help you fix this." I studied her. She wasn't lying. She looked like someone who'd woken up mid-fall, with no parachute. "What do you know about Christopher's next move?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "He's trying to buy out your shares quietly using a holding company registered under a shell name. It's meant to look like outside interest, but it's him. And once he controls 60%, he'll rewrite all governance." That explained the board's recent memo. "And the investors I pressed? He's only showing them his side of the numbers. The creative pipeline, the projected growth. It's all based on your work. Isabel. He's selling them content you originated without telling them you still own the rights." Bingo. That was fraud, not just morally, but legally. I stood, grabbed my bag. "Victoria, I need copies of anything you've seen. Memos, emails, contracts, especially if he signed anything under false disclosure."
I'll get them. She nodded. "But I need protection. If he finds out."
"You'll get it," I said. "If this company survives, I'll make sure you're not the casualty." Her eyes filled again. "Why would you help me?" I paused at the door. "Because I remember what it's like to be told you're powerful until you become inconvenient." That night, I sat alone in my apartment the first time I'd gone back since I walked out. The red heels were gone, but the silence remained. I packed. Not just my things, but my memories. Old notebooks, journals, Drafts from my early days. Pages full of dreams I once believed were safe beside someone like Christopher. As I zipped up the last suitcase, I found it. A gift from our first anniversary. A pen, heavy, brass-plated, engraved with, "Write the story that lasts, C." I held it for a long time. Not because I missed him, but because the irony was unbearable. He gave me the pen, but he never thought I'd use it against him. The next morning, I met with Alexander again. We sat in his office as I laid out the new evidence. Emails from Victoria, meeting minutes she wasn't supposed to have, a signed intent letter showing Christopher planned to monetize content that I still owned the rights to. "This is textbook misrepresentation," Alexander said, eyes scanning. "If Langley's team gets this, he'll pull out." I finished, and Christopher's takeover falls apart. We built a 3-stage plan. Stage 1. File an injunction freezing any changes to company ownership or board authority until a full legal review. Stage 2. Deliver a full evidence package to the board and Langley's firm with third-party IP confirmation. Stage 3. Prepare for war. PR, legal, emotional. Alexander looked up from his notes. "Are you ready for this?" I nodded. I've been ready since he handed me that pen. The next day, I walked into the building like I owned it because, in many ways, I still did. Mike greeted me with a wink. "Word is, you're shaking the tree." "Time to see what rotten fruit falls," I smiled. I headed straight to the top floor. The doors to the boardroom were open. Christopher was inside, mid-presentation, slides glowing behind him, his voice full of swagger. "I have secured early commitment from Langley Partners," he boasted, "which means by Q4 we'll have full creative independence." I stepped in, loudly. "Funny, Christopher, since what you're selling doesn't belong to you." Every head turned. Christopher froze. "What the hell are you doing?" I tossed the binder onto the table. It landed with a satisfying thud. Langley flipped it open. "Read the first few lines." Silence fell. Then he spoke. "Mr. Miller, is this accurate?" Christopher looked pale. That's exaggerated." Langley didn't blink. "If even half of this is true, you've misled my firm. Our investment offer is suspended immediately." Christopher looked at me. The rage in his eyes wasn't about betrayal. It was about control slipping through his fingers. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of my narrative. Cliffhanger. Cut to black. Voiceover. Calm and resolute. He thought he buried me in footnotes. But I was always the author. The moment Langley walked out, the air in the boardroom turned into glass fragile, sharp, ready to shatter under the wrong word. Christopher just stood there, lips parted, hands twitching at his sides like he was trying to rewrite time by sheer will. But I didn't move. Not yet. There's a quiet power in watching a man realize the castle he built was on someone else's foundation. I could see it sinking in. The panic behind his eyes. The mental math unraveling. He wasn't worried about the company, he was worried about exposure. He opened his mouth, finally. "You're making a scene," he said, his voice just barely holding. I didn't flinch. "No. Christopher, I'm making a correction." Behind me, members of the board began whispering. Pages turned. The contract copies I had distributed were now weapons. One of the board members, a woman named Marlene, who had sat silently through years of his condescension, spoke up. "I reviewed the dates," she said. "If this timeline holds, Isabel was the sole editor behind every profitable memoir in our catalog for 5 consecutive years." Christopher's jaw clenched. "That doesn't mean she's entitled to." Clause 7C. I cut in. "You signed it. It protects any original editorial frameworks I created. And unless you plan on arguing those were your line edits, we both know what this means." Another board member, Greg from legal, cleared his throat. If Isabel pushes this to court, she could argue for retroactive compensation, asset freeze, or even dissolution of the joint ownership. Investors would bail in an hour. Christopher's face turned a mottled red. "This is revenge," he hissed, low enough that only I could hear it.
"No," I replied. "This is restraint."
He moved toward me, fists balled. But then he stopped, because Victoria had just walked in. Every eye turned to her. No longer a secret, no longer a whisper. She stepped forward, calm, hair pinned back again like she needed armor. In her hand was a folder, and she dropped it on the table with one sentence. "I can corroborate every word Isabel said." Christopher blinked. "Don't," she warned. "Don't act shocked. You brought me into this. You used me. You thought I was too ambitious to notice, too desperate to care." He looked like he wanted to speak, but she cut him off. "I'm not here for you," she said, turning to me. "I'm here because if we're building anything out of this wreckage, it shouldn't be built on your silence." That folder, it had emails, memos, one that literally read, "Once we sever her, we'll scrub the name and rebrand." Dated, forwarded, stupidly careless. It was the smoking gun. Greg leaned back, exhaled. "That's enough." The board called for a recess. I left the room quietly, but my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Outside, I ducked into the women's bathroom and leaned against the sink. My hands were shaking. My knees felt hollow. It wasn't triumph, it was pressure, like standing in a building you built and realizing the beams might finally hold. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't some tragic editorial wife. She was sharp, lined with survival, tired, yes, but luminous with defiance. In my bag, the old brass pen from our anniversary pressed against my wallet. I pulled it out, clicked it once, held it in my palm. He gave it to me, thinking it was a compliment, a symbol of creativity. But now it was my signature, my weapon, the thing I would use to sign the next chapter. By the end of the week, everything moved like dominoes in slow motion. Langley issued a formal letter to the board, rescinding his interest pending internal legal compliance resolution. Translation: Christopher was radioactive. Marlene rallied 2 other senior board members to request an independent audit. Translation: the wolves were circling. And Alexander. He filed a temporary restraining order on IP transfer granted within 48 hours by the court. It meant nothing. Christopher touched in the last 2 quarters could be sold, licensed, or repackaged. The company was stuck. Exactly what it needed to force a reckoning. Friday, 6:12 p.m. I sat alone in the executive conference room, my laptop open, paperwork lined up like chess pieces. And then he came in. Christopher. No more suit, just a white button-up, sleeves rolled, like he thought looking casual made him seem less dangerous. He didn't sit.
"Isabel?"
I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "We don't need to keep playing chicken. You've proven your point." I raised an eyebrow. What point would that be? "That you matter," he said. "That you were never just my wife. That you were the other half of this company." He sounded rehearsed, like he'd been coached. But something about the way his fingers trembled, that was real. "You're scared," I said plainly. He chuckled. "I'm pissed. There's a difference." "No, Christopher. You're scared because for the first time in your life, a woman who helped you build something doesn't want to be grateful. She wants to be credited." Silence. Then I laid the final paper on the table.
"A buyout offer. Clean, brutal, unapologetic."
"You can take this," I said. "You walk with 40%. You keep your public face. You sign over all IP you didn't originate. You agree to a non-compete for 5 years. He stared at it like it burned. "That's your idea of peace." "No," I said, eyes steady. "It's my idea of mercy." He didn't take the deal that night. But 2 days later, he did. Because he had no cards left. I watched him pack up his office a week later. No one came to say goodbye, not even Victoria. When he passed my office, he paused in the doorway. "Do you hate me?" I looked up from my desk. "No, I pity you." He left without another word. I stayed late that night. Alone, office dim. I stood by the window, looking out at the city, my city. And then I opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Not legal documents, not contracts. A manuscript.
Untouched, raw, mine.
The first thing I'd written in years. A memoir. Its title, The Ghost Editor. I picked up the brass pen and wrote the first line. Some stories we write for love. Others we write so no one ever forgets who wrote them. After Christopher left, the silence in the office changed. It wasn't that suffocating quiet, the kind that feels like something's lurking. No, this silence was clean, spacious, like the air had finally been cleared of all the smoke and half-truths. And for the first time in over a decade, I exhaled fully. But victory doesn't feel like a parade. It feels like paperwork, contracts, HR policy rewrites, press statements that dance on the edge of too much and not enough. There were phone calls to authors, meetings with staff, and new titles to greenlight. Yet every evening, I stayed behind. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd spend an hour with the manuscript in my drawer, The Ghost Editor. Just a few more pages each time. My story. Not dressed up, not fictionalized. Just real. And slowly, writing started to feel like freedom again. 3 weeks after the buyout, the company's atmosphere had changed completely. People laughed in the break room again. Mike, the ever-loyal guard, had a mug now that read Moral Support Crew. He claimed someone anonymously left it on his desk. We both knew it was Megan. Victoria had transitioned into a compliance role under Marlene's mentorship. I didn't trust her fully yet, but I respected her resilience. She was rebuilding, brick by brick. But not everyone was happy. Christopher wasn't done. On a Wednesday afternoon, Alexander called me. I was in a meeting with the marketing team when I saw his name flash across my phone. I stepped out to answer. "Trouble," he said bluntly. "I just got word from our contacts at Langley. Christopher's been leaking internal files to a tech startup that's trying to undercut our business model." I closed my eyes, jaw tight. "Is he that desperate?" "Yes." And the kicker, Alexander sighed. "He's using old pitch decks you co-wrote as part of their onboarding packet, branded them as legacy drafts to avoid legal flags." I went cold. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft? Again. "I want to file a cease and desist," I said. "I already prepped it," he replied. "But this time, we go further. We file for damages. Breach of NDA. Misappropriation of intellectual property." I nodded. "Do it." But I didn't stop there. That night, I called Charles Langley himself. He picked up after 2 rings. "Ms. Grant." "Mr. Langley," I said, steady. "I wanted to make you aware Christopher Miller is violating the terms of our dissolution agreement. He's attempting to partner with firms based on stolen editorial frameworks." Langley was quiet for a beat. "Then send me the proof. If he's trying to spin value off your legacy content, well, let's just say I don't invest in liars twice." I smiled to myself. "I'll have the file on your desk by morning." By Friday, the startup had withdrawn the partnership offer. Christopher was issued a restraining order from using any Grant Miller-affiliated material, including client lists, branding language, and future proposals. It was surgical, clean, legal, but also heartbreaking. Because deep down, a part of me had always believed he'd stop before self-destruction. That maybe, just maybe, he'd protect the legacy we built even if our marriage had burned. But no. Some men can't survive without control. And when they lose it, they'd rather blow up the ship than admit they didn't build it alone. That weekend, I went to the lake house. It had been years since I'd stepped foot in it, the place we bought together before everything got big. It still smelled like cedar and old books. Dusty light spilled in through the windows. I found our wedding photo in the guest bedroom, tucked in a drawer. He looked so sure of himself in it. I looked happy, naive, maybe, but luminous with belief. I held the frame for a moment, then placed it face down on the nightstand. Let the past sleep. I lit a fire, poured a glass of wine, and pulled out the ghost editor. Chapter 10. The day I took my name back. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until the last sentence poured out. And when it did, it felt like shedding armor. On Monday, I walked into the office with a different kind of power. Not the calculated, measured confidence I'd always used to survive boardrooms. This was something else. Ownership. Marlene caught me by the elevator. I read your manuscript, she said, holding up a marked-up copy. You did? Twice. She smiled. It's sharp, it's brutal, and it's exactly what this industry needs. My heart skipped. You think it's ready? She shrugged. Depends. Are you ready to let people see the version of you that doesn't edit the truth? I blinked, thought about it. Then I nodded. Yeah, I think I am. Later that afternoon, Victoria stopped by my office. She looked nervous. Isabel, there's something I didn't tell you. I looked up. Go on? I found another draft of Christopher's rebrand pitch. It wasn't just about removing your name. He was planning to sell your editorial methods to an AI startup. He wanted to build a machine learning system trained on your edits. I felt my blood run cold. He was trying to replicate me. She nodded, down to the tone, the phrasing, the style files he exported. They had your notes. My throat tightened. Because this wasn't just personal, it was existential. I wasn't just fighting for credit anymore. I was fighting to prove that my mind, my instinct couldn't be duplicated by code. That the human behind the words still mattered. He tried to erase me. Then he tried to replace me. But what he forgot was that my voice was never programmed. It was born. The first time I stepped on stage to read from the ghost editor, my palms were sweating. It wasn't the crowd. It wasn't the lights. It wasn't even the fear of being misunderstood. It was the realization that for the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding behind someone else's story. I was the story. The auditorium wasn't massive. Maybe 200 people. Book lovers, critics, former interns, even a few faces I hadn't seen since the early Grant Miller days. But they listened.
And when I read the line,
He stole my name from the credits, but not from the narrative. There was a pause, a stillness, then thunderous applause. Afterward, a young woman, early 20s, nervous but burning with something sharp in her eyes, approached me. She clutched her copy of the book like it was armor. I'm studying publishing, she said. Everyone told me to get used to being invisible. But after reading what you wrote, I realized maybe that's not a rule. Maybe that's just what they want us to believe. I looked at her and saw myself, 25 years ago. I signed her book with the brass pen, write louder than they expect you to. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. Not just in the press, the reviews were glowing. The New Yorker called it a scalpel of a memoir, precise, personal, and brutal in its honesty, but also in the industry. Podcasts quoted my chapters. Panel invites rolled in. Publishing houses started having meetings about editorial authorship, a phrase no one had used seriously before. And somewhere in the dust of it all, Grant Miller Media quietly removed Miller from its name. Now it's just Grant. Nothing more. Nothing less. But let me tell you the real twist. Christopher called me. Out of nowhere. Unblocked number. just a name I hadn't seen on my screen in over 2 months. I didn't answer the first time, but I did the second.
Isabel, he said, voice smaller than I remembered. You won.
I laughed softly. There was no game. Christopher, only the truth. He paused. I read your book, twice. I said nothing. Then he added, You made me look like a monster. I stayed silent for a beat.
No, I said finally. I just stopped editing your behavior for public consumption.
He didn't argue. Maybe for the first time in years. He knew better.
I lost everything, he whispered.
I thought about that. No, I said again. You lost the version of everything that was built on lies. You still have your name, your health, your freedom, and maybe, if you're lucky, a chance to figure out who you are without the applause. He never called again. Months passed. The company bloomed. We partnered with grassroots storytellers. We launched a mentorship program for women in editorial leadership. And every Thursday at 4 p.m., I blocked out 1 hour just to write. No meetings, no phone calls. Just the keyboard, the page. The brass pen sits beside me every time. I rarely use it, but I see it. A relic, a reminder. Not of what was stolen, but of what was reclaimed. Marlene, during one of our walks, asked me, Do you ever miss it, the version of success you used to chase? I thought about it. The fancy dinners, the forced smiles, the facade of partnership. No, I said. I only miss the girl who thought she needed permission to be brilliant. She smiled. That girl wouldn't recognize the woman standing here. I smiled back. Good. And Victoria. She stayed. She earned her place this time without manipulation, without shortcuts. She's the one who caught a copyright infringement attempt last week before legal even noticed. Guess I'm not just a pawn anymore, she joked as she forwarded the notice to me. No, I said, smiling. Now you're one of the knights. One afternoon, as I walked through the office, I overheard a junior editor talking to a nervous author on the phone. No worries, she said gently. We'll make sure your voice isn't lost in the edits. That's what we do here. I paused, because that was the culture I wanted. Not just power, but dignity, restoration, credit. Yes, but more than that, acknowledgement. The final copy of The Ghost Editor now sits on my bookshelf, leather-bound, gold-trimmed, signed copies sold out in 4 days. Inside the back cover, there's a single quote etched in delicate print. Sometimes the sharpest revenge is telling the truth so well they can't silence it. That quote, mine.
No ghostwriter.
No cosign.
Just me?
So if you're still watching this, maybe you've been wronged, erased, silenced, told to take the high road while someone else rewrote your legacy. Here's what I'll tell you. The high road doesn't mean walking away. Sometimes it means standing still long enough for the liars to collapse under the weight of their own fiction. Sometimes it means picking up the pen and writing the damn truth. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been the uncredited, the invisible, the silenced, drop a comment below. Share your story. Your name matters. Your voice matters. And if you haven't yet, hit like, subscribe. We've got more stories to tell.